She slapped a 15-year-old in first class. One text, and the billionaire moved fast. Before we begin the story, please leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Jordan King walked through the jet bridge, his heart steady, his steps firm. He was only 15, dressed in a black hoodie, dark jeans, and spotless white sneakers. Around his neck hung a pair of sleek headphones. In his hand was a full-price first-class ticket, seat 2A. It wasn't a gift, it wasn't an upgrade. It was paid for by his father, Christopher King, a billionaire tech mogul and one of the largest shareholders in Sky America Airlines. But nobody knew that yet. As Jordan stepped into the first-class cabin of Delta Sky Flight 982, he noticed the usual calm. Businessmen in suits reading financial newspapers. Women in silk scarves scrolling through their phones. No one said a word, but many glanced his way. He felt it, the questioning eyes, the tight-lipped smiles, the unspoken, "Are you sure you belong here?" He said nothing. Jordan opened the overhead bin, placed his backpack inside, and calmly sat down by the window. He didn't pull out his phone. He didn't play music. Instead, he opened a book, Things Fall Apart, and began to read. But his silence didn't protect him. From the front galley, a woman in her 50s walked down the aisle. Tall, crisp uniform, perfect bun, cold stare. Her name tag read, Nancy Harlow, Senior Flight Attendant. She greeted a few passengers politely. But when her eyes landed on Jordan, she froze. Nancy's face changed. The smile disappeared. Her eyes narrowed, scanning him from head to toe. She stopped right in front of him. "Excuse me, are you sure you're in the right seat?" Jordan looked up, surprised but calm. "Yes, ma'am. Seat 2A. She didn't ask nicely again. She extended her hand. "Let me see your ticket." Jordan reached into his hoodie pocket and handed it over with both hands. Nancy took it with 2 fingers, like it was contaminated. She stared at the ticket, then back at him. "This is a first-class seat," she said slowly, loud enough for others to hear. "Yes, I know," Jordan replied quietly. Nancy's lips tightened. "Are you flying alone?" "Yes." "That's highly unusual." Her tone was sharp now. "You must have gotten this by mistake. Maybe it was meant for someone else." Jordan sat still. "It's my seat, ma'am." Nancy leaned down, her voice cold. "You're disturbing the cabin, young man. I need you to move to economy while we figure this out." Jordan didn't argue. He simply said, "This is my ticket." Then it happened. Nancy reached down and slapped his hand, the one resting on the armrest, and snatched his phone. The slap echoed. Passengers looked up. One woman gasped. A man cleared his throat and turned away. No one said anything. Jordan winced but didn't react. He looked at her. Quiet. Steady. Nancy tossed his phone back onto his lap. "Take your things and go to the back, now." Jordan picked up his backpack. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He pulled his hoodie tighter, stood up slowly, and walked down the aisle in silence. First class went quiet. Too quiet. Nobody stopped her. Nobody defended him. He reached the very last row in economy, where the armrests were broken and the tray tables stuck. He sat down by the window, pulled out his phone, and typed just one message. "She slapped me, sent me to the back. I'm in the last row." He hit send. Then he looked out the window, not at the sky, but at the system that just pushed him to the bottom, like he was nothing. What no one realized was that that text would reach the one person who could ground the entire flight and flip everything upside down. Hundreds of miles away, on the 62nd floor of a steel and glass tower in downtown Manhattan, Christopher King, CEO of Kingware Technologies, billionaire, and majority shareholder of Sky America Airlines, stood by his office window, sipping black coffee. His phone buzzed. It was a message from his son. She slapped me, sent me to the back. I'm in the last row. Christopher's hand stilled. He didn't blink, didn't speak. He walked calmly to his desk, sat down, and pressed a secure speed dial number labeled with nothing but a single letter. S. A woman answered instantly. Yes, Mr. King. Christopher's voice was calm. I see. Flight 982. Check seat 2A. My son was just assaulted. Yes, sir. He ended the call. No anger. No shouting. But the machine had been activated. Back on the plane, Jordan sat in the last seat, quiet. The hum of the engines filled the silence. The flight attendants moved briskly, ignoring him like he didn't exist. Nancy Harlow, meanwhile, stood near the front galley, sipping coffee like nothing happened. Her face was composed. She had done this before. She believed in keeping standards. In her world, people like Jordan didn't belong in first class, no matter what ticket they held. And no one had ever challenged her, until now. 7 minutes later, the flight deck phone rang. Captain Richard Hammond, a veteran pilot with over 30 years of experience, picked it up. He listened, then frowned. A moment later, his voice echoed over the cabin intercom. Senior Flight Attendant Nancy Harlow, please report to the cockpit. Passengers looked up. Nancy stiffened. She smoothed her uniform and walked briskly forward. Confident, unbothered. But when she stepped into the cockpit and saw the glowing video feed on the communication screen, her heart sank. On screen was David Langston, COO of Sky America Airlines, flanked by 2 corporate lawyers. Nancy Harlow? He asked, voice cold. Yes, sir. We've received a report involving your conduct toward passenger Jordan King, seat 2A. Are you aware of who he is? Nancy blinked. Just a boy. He didn't look. He's the son of Christopher King. And you just slapped him in front of first class. Nancy's throat went dry. I didn't know. That's the problem. Langston cut her off. You didn't verify. You assumed. And because of that, the entire flight is now under executive hold. Captain Hammond added, his voice stern. This plane will not move until you walk to the back, apologize in front of all passengers, and return the boy to first class. Nancy's face turned pale. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. If you refuse, Langston continued, you'll never work for this airline again. The screen went black. Back in the cabin, Jordan still sat quietly by the window, fingers resting on his phone. He wasn't waiting for justice. He didn't expect anything, but when he saw Nancy walking down the aisle, slow, pale, silent, he knew something had changed. Passengers turned to look. Whispers spread. Nancy stopped in front of him. Her voice shook. Jordan, I want to apologize. I made a mistake. He looked at her, calm. You didn't check my ticket. You just looked at me and decided. The cabin fell silent. Nancy nodded stiffly. I was wrong. Jordan stood up. I'll return to my seat. Not because you told me to, but because I earned it. And as he walked past the rows of stunned passengers back toward 2A, something shifted. This time, they weren't silent out of fear. They were silent because they were watching power reverse direction, and dignity rise from the back of the plane. The cabin fell quiet as Nancy Wilkins stepped out from the cockpit. Her shoes clicked faintly against the aisle carpet. Gone was the confident gait of a woman used to being in charge. Now, every step felt like it echoed with judgment. She passed row 2A, the very seat she had stripped from a child minutes earlier. The passengers, who once ignored the commotion, now watched silently, their phones discreetly ready in their hands. Nobody was filming yet, but the tension said they would if things got worse. At the very back of the plane, Jordan sat by the window, staring at the clouded runway through thick glass. He didn't move when Nancy arrived. She stood in front of him, hands clasped, trying to look calm. "Jordan," she started, her voice barely audible. "I want to apologize. I misjudged the situation. I should have checked properly." Jordan didn't even blink. His voice was low but carried clearly. "You didn't misjudge the ticket. You judged me." Nancy swallowed hard. I didn't mean—" "But you did," he interrupted. "You saw a kid in a hoodie, sitting alone, and you decided I didn't belong, without asking, without thinking. You decided." Now several passengers in nearby rows were watching openly. A woman 2 seats ahead slowly pulled down her mask. A man holding a glass of water stopped mid-sip. Jordan picked up his phone and looked at it, not to type, but to remind himself why he was here. "I paid for that seat. Legally. Fully. My name's on it. I didn't need to prove that to you," he said. Nancy stood frozen. Her cheeks burned. The authority she wore like a badge was gone. What was left was just a uniform, and eyes looking right through it. "I was wrong," she whispered. Jordan stood. Not aggressively, not angrily, but with dignity. "I'll go back to my seat. Not because you told me, but because I earned it." He walked past her down the aisle. Every head turned. This time, not in judgment, but in quiet understanding. Some with shame, some with regret, and some in admiration. He reached 2A and sat back down. No fanfare, no spotlight. He just opened his book again, though he didn't read. Nancy lingered in the aisle for a moment too long. Then she turned and walked slowly back, past every row she once commanded. Passengers stared. But none offered comfort. That was the price. In the galley, her fellow flight attendant Avery Brooks stood waiting. Nancy's eyes met hers, but Avery said nothing. No sympathy. No defense, just silence. The cockpit phone buzzed. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be experiencing a short delay before takeoff. Thank you for your patience." Jordan heard it, and he knew. The wheels were already turning. Far above the clouds, systems were moving. His father had spoken. But the storm wasn't about a CEO's power. It was about truth finally speaking louder than silence. Back at Walker Enterprises headquarters in New York, the office on the 42nd floor was silent. The air was crisp, the windows gleaming with the skyline behind. Seated at the long glass desk was Elijah Walker, founder and chairman of Walker Enterprises. He wasn't just a billionaire. He was a man who built a global empire from scratch. Tech, aviation, real estate. And now, someone had humiliated his only son. The message from Jordan still glowed on his private phone. "She slapped me and sent me to the back. No one said anything. I'm okay." Elijah didn't respond with rage. No shouting, no pacing. He simply picked up his direct line, the one that bypassed middle management, and said just 7 words. "Flight 908, freeze all activity." Now. On the other end, Cynthia Park, head of airline operations, nearly dropped her coffee. "Yes, Mr. Walker." "Immediate hold." Back on the plane, the captain received the alert. "Immediate hold. No takeoff." "Do not inform cabin Y." He furrowed his brow. "Copy that," he responded, then turned off the engine prep. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. Some glanced at their watches. A few murmured about delays. But in row 2A, Jordan already knew. Something was happening, quietly, like always. Minutes later, Cynthia Park stood in front of a crisis management boardroom screen showing live analytics. Twitter mentions, plus 9,000 in 30 minutes. Hashtag C2A, trending at number 4 in the US. Passenger video footage uploading from inside the plane. The footage was clear. Nancy Wilkins standing over a calm, seated black teenager, a raised voice, a hand slap. A boy walking silently to the back. Someone had recorded it from 3 rows away. Someone else had already shared it. And now, it was everywhere. In the PR war room, a junior executive whispered, "Should we prepare a statement?" Cynthia shook her head. "Not yet. Mr. Walker will handle this himself. We don't put out fires. He redesigns the entire system." Meanwhile, inside the plane, tension was building. The young woman in seat 4C, Sophie Harris, whispered to her fiancé, "That's the boy, the one they moved." "I saw the slap," he replied quietly. "Should have said something." In the back row, Nancy sat rigid in the galley, eyes staring blankly at the metal coffee pot. She'd done this before, asserted control, removed misfits quietly with no resistance. But never had it gone this far, because never before had she touched Elijah Walker's son. Then came the call to the cockpit, a private video link from the airline's executive board. The screen lit up. Elijah Walker's face appeared. Captain Hammond stood up. He knew the man's power by reputation alone. "Elijah Walker," the captain said, nodding. Elijah's voice was calm but unshakable. "Who removed my son from his seat?" The captain hesitated. "Our head flight attendant, Nancy Wilkins, sir. Then she will return him to his seat, publicly, and apologize. Or she will not work a single flight again." He leaned forward. "Understand something, Captain. This isn't about my last name. It's about every kid who's ever been looked at like that and told they didn't belong. That ends today." "Yes, sir." Back in 2A, Jordan closed his book. The hum of whispers filled the cabin now. Someone had recognized him. A gray-haired man in seat 1D finally spoke to his wife. "I knew he looked familiar." "That's Elijah Walker's son." The atmosphere shifted, not from sympathy, but from realization. They hadn't stood up because they didn't know who he was. And now, they understood the ugliness of that fact. Meanwhile, on TikTok, the video was gaining over 250,000 views in just under an hour. One voiceover caption said, "She thought he didn't belong." But his silence grounded the whole plane. Jordan didn't speak. He didn't need to. The whole world was starting to talk for him. The intercom crackled softly in the galley. "Nancy Wilkins, report to the cockpit immediately." Nancy's hand trembled slightly as she set down the half-stirred cup of coffee. Her throat went dry. She straightened her uniform, reapplied her lipstick out of habit, and forced a neutral expression onto her face. She had no idea what awaited her. Inside the cockpit, Captain Hammond stood solemnly beside the flight's small monitor. On the screen was David Harper, CEO of the airline, and standing just behind him, Elijah Walker. Nancy's stomach turned. David spoke first. "Ms. Wilkins, do you know who you removed from first class today?" Nancy hesitated. He didn't look like... "That," Elijah cut in, his voice calm and cold, "is the exact problem." The silence was suffocating. David Harper continued, "You didn't verify his ticket. You didn't follow protocol. You made a decision based entirely on your personal bias, and then you escalated it with physical contact." Nancy's voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't know who he was." "You didn't need to," Elijah replied. "He had a legal ticket. He was calm. He followed the rules. The only thing out of place was your assumption." Nancy lowered her eyes. Captain Hammond finally spoke. "You are instructed to apologize, publicly, clearly, and immediately, and escort Mr. Walker back to his original seat." "If I don't?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Elijah didn't blink. "Then consider this your final flight." Nancy stepped out of the cockpit, like someone walking toward their own trial. The cabin had grown quiet. Word had spread. People were staring, not just at Jordan, but at the empty seat in 2A. She walked through first class slowly. The usual click of her heels now felt like thunder. Passengers turned. Some lifted their phones. Others simply stared. Nancy pushed aside the curtain separating economy. Her eyes met Jordan's. He looked up, calm, focused. Not angry, not shaken, but seeing him made her knees feel weak. She stood beside him for a moment too long. Then she spoke, clearly enough for the entire cabin to hear. "Jordan, I'd like to apologize. I was wrong. I judged you based on how you looked, and I made a mistake, an unacceptable one." Jordan said nothing. "You had every right to be in your seat, and I'm truly sorry for what I did." Passengers nearby were recording. Some lowered their heads. A woman across the aisle put her hand over her mouth. A man whispered, "Finally." Nancy extended her hand. "Please, allow me to escort you back." Jordan stood, but not because she asked. He moved on his own terms. He slung his backpack over his shoulder and walked ahead of her. Not fast, not slow. Just steady. Every row he passed, eyes followed. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He had become something more. In first class, as he approached 2A, several passengers shifted awkwardly. The man in 1D gave a respectful nod. The woman in 2C crossed her arms and looked down, ashamed. Jordan sat back down in his seat. He didn't look at Nancy again. He didn't need to. Nancy stood there, frozen. She opened her mouth but couldn't find words. So she turned and walked to the back of the plane, her pride unraveling with every step. Back in the galley, she slumped against the wall. Her headset buzzed. Passenger 2A returned. "Apology witnessed. You are cleared to close the cabin door." The plane would take off now, but nothing on board would ever be the same. By the time the plane's wheels lifted off the runway, the internet was already on fire. In row 21, a college student named Haley Thomas, wearing a Columbia hoodie, had uploaded a 21-second video clip to Twitter with the caption, "Black teen slapped in first class for not belonging. Turns out he's a billionaire's son. Flight 672. The video captured the moment Nancy slapped Jordan's hand and the silent walk of shame to the back of the plane. Within 30 minutes, the clip had 40,000 views. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, Seat 2A was trending across multiple platforms. On the ground, inside Walker Enterprises headquarters, Elijah's assistant entered his glass-walled office. "Sir, it's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok. Reddit, over 500,000 views already." Elijah looked out the window, calm but resolute. "Good," he said. "Let it burn." He wasn't after damage control. He wanted exposure. At the airline's PR department, chaos erupted. Phones rang non-stop. The head of crisis management had to cancel a board meeting. "We're getting hammered in the press," the comms director shouted. "CNN just picked it up. NBC is requesting comment. We need to move, now." One intern scrolled through Reddit. "Guys, the post is on our public freakout. Over 10,000 upvotes in an hour." Another added, "And Human Rights Watch just retweeted the video." The headline everywhere was the same. 15-year-old black teen kicked out of first class. One call from dad. Plane grounded. The silence that passengers kept on the plane was now being broken globally. Back in seat 2A, Jordan remained quiet, his book open, eyes unfocused. He wasn't reading. He was listening. To the silence that had once been his prison, now becoming his amplifier. A flight attendant quietly approached him. "Would you like anything, sir?" Jordan glanced up. "Just water." Her hand didn't shake. Her voice didn't stutter. And this time her eyes met his with respect, not scrutiny. She returned with the water, leaving a napkin beside it with one handwritten word. Scene. Jordan folded it once and tucked it into his book. At the back of the plane, Nancy Wilkins sat on a metal jump seat, her face pale, her fingers twitching. Her work phone buzzed. A message from airline HR. Meet with HR and legal immediately upon landing. Do not exit without clearance. She didn't reply. She couldn't. For the first time in her 15-year career, she realized no one was going to cover for her. In first class, whispers replaced the silence. Passengers murmured, "That's the CEO's son?" He didn't even raise his voice. She slapped him, and nobody said a word. Across the aisle, a middle-aged man in a gray suit leaned forward toward Jordan. I saw what happened," he said, his voice low. "I should have said something. I'm sorry." Jordan turned to him, his voice steady. So many people saw it. But nobody stood up. The man nodded, shamefaced. "I won't stay quiet next time." Jordan nodded slowly, then returned to his book. Far away, at CNN's New York studio, a news anchor looked into the camera during a breaking news segment. A 15-year-old black teenager, legally seated in first class, was slapped by a flight attendant and sent to the back of the plane. What no one realized was that his father, tech billionaire Elijah Walker, was watching it all unfold in real time. She paused, and he made one phone call that stopped everything. As the plane touched down, the wheels thudded against the runway, marking the end of a flight, but the beginning of a storm. The passengers didn't move. No one reached for luggage. No one unfastened their belts. It wasn't just the landing that had them frozen, it was the weight of what they had witnessed. The familiar ding echoed. "You may now remove your seatbelts." Still, silence. Jordan remained in seat 2A, his posture calm, his hands resting on a closed book. His eyes stared out the oval window as the jet bridge extended toward the aircraft, like an arm of truth reaching in. 3 people in sharp gray uniforms boarded first, 2 men and a woman. One held a black folder, another carried a recorder. They walked directly to Jordan. The woman spoke softly but clearly. "Mr. Jordan Walker?" He nodded once. "I'm with the airline's executive response team. We are here to apologize on behalf of the entire company. An investigation has been launched. Protocols will be revised, and your statement will be recorded if you're willing to give one." Jordan didn't smile. He didn't blink. He looked her in the eye and said, "What happened to me happens to people who don't have my last name, every single day. And no one hears about it. No cameras. No father who owns part of the airline, just silence." The woman swallowed hard. "We understand." Jordan leaned in slightly. "I don't want your apology. I want your change." Passengers were now slowly exiting the plane, row by row, but many stopped briefly by Jordan's seat. Some offered quiet nods. Some whispered, "Thank you." A young boy, maybe 10, clutched his dad's hand and whispered, "He's like a superhero." At the gate, Elijah Walker stood in a tailored navy blue suit. His eyes, cold with clarity, met his son's as Jordan stepped off the plane. They didn't hug. They didn't pose. Elijah placed a firm hand on Jordan's shoulder and simply asked, "Ready?" Jordan replied, "Yeah." But not to talk about me, to talk about everyone else this happened to, and nobody listened. In a nearby press room, cameras were rolling. Lights bright. Reporters waiting. A microphone stood in the center. Jordan walked up to it, not with the swagger of a billionaire's son, but with the steady grace of someone who had earned every word. He didn't prepare a statement. He didn't need to. He looked directly into the camera and said, "Don't wait until someone's last name is Walker to believe they belong. Don't wait for a video to go viral before you speak up. Silence isn't neutral. Silence is permission." I was seen because of who my father is. But so many others are ignored because of who they're not. That needs to change, starting today. The room went silent. No one shouted questions. No one interrupted. Back at airline headquarters, the CEO had already signed the termination paperwork for Nancy Wilkins. A copy of the incident was now included in every flight attendant training module as a cautionary case study. Nancy didn't fight it. She never even asked for a hearing. She just stared at the suspension letter and whispered, "It was just a seat." But deep down, she knew it was never about the seat. It was about what she thought someone like him deserved. Online, Jordan's statement was everywhere. Silence isn't neutral. Silence is permission. Seat 2A/Jordan Walker had flyfare. On TikTok, a clip of him sitting calmly with his book had over 6 million views in 24 hours. On Twitter, people shared their own stories. I was 12, and they said I didn't look like a business-class passenger. Same thing happened to my brother. He just never told anyone. I won't stay silent next time. That night, Jordan sat quietly in his room, the glow of the city outside his window. His phone buzzed with messages, interview requests, sponsorship deals, influencers offering collaboration. He ignored them all. Instead, he picked up his book, opened it, and reread the page he never finished on the plane. And on the inside flap, he tucked the napkin from the flight. One word: seen. What would you have done if you were on that plane? Would you have spoken up? Would you have stayed silent? Let us know in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed injustice and wished you'd said something? Share your story. Like this story, tap that thumbs up. Want more stories that open hearts and minds? Hit subscribe. And remember, silence is a choice. So is courage.